When I first stepped onto the cricket field representing my country, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a disappointment. The media didn't hold back. My performance was torn apart, my technique criticized, and my place on the team questioned. I wasn't born a champion. I was shaped by rejection, molded by failure, and tested through criticism that could easily have broken me. But here's what I want you to understand. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. It's the very soil from which greatness grows. In those early years, I would lie awake at night, wondering if I had what it took. I wasn't the strongest player, not the fastest, not even the most naturally gifted. I saw others shine while I struggled. But deep down, I made a decision not to give up, but to go deeper, to train harder, to turn every mistake into a lesson. Every dropped catch, every poor inning, every harsh headline, they weren't just failures. They were data points, clues, signals, telling me where to focus, where to grow. There's something powerful about being underestimated. When people expect nothing from you, you learn to fight not for recognition, but for yourself. You develop grit. You develop hunger. I learned that failure doesn't mean you're not good enough. It often means you haven't yet tapped into your full potential. The problem is, most people take failure personally. They treat it like a wall they can't go beyond. I chose to treat it like a mirror showing me what needed to change. And I'll be honest, it wasn't glamorous. There were days I felt like quitting, days I walked off the field with my head down. But I kept going. I kept practicing. Not because I was confident, but because I refused to let failure define me. I realized that success isn't about getting everything right from the start. It's about staying in the game long enough to get it right in the end. When you're down, that's when you discover your true strength. Not when everything's working, not when people are clapping, but when no one believes in you and you choose to believe in yourself. I wasn't handed success on a silver platter. I had to build it, brick by brick, out of every loss, every misstep, and every moment of doubt. Eventually, those same critics who once dismissed me began to respect me. Not because I silenced them with words, but because I showed up again and again with action. Consistency is louder than applause. Growth speaks for itself. The early defeats that once embarrassed me became the very foundation I stood on. Without them, there would have been no motivation to improve, no hunger to win, no reason to rise. Most people avoid failure because it hurts their ego. But pain is the greatest teacher. It humbles you, it sharpens you, it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that need to evolve. Looking back, I'm grateful I didn't peak too early. I'm grateful for the failure, because without it, I would have never learned how to win, not just on the field, but in life. That's the truth I want you to walk away with. Early failure isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your transformation. At the time the World Cup came around, most people had already written us off. They said we were too weak, too inconsistent, too divided to make it anywhere. And truthfully, if you looked at our early games, they weren't wrong. We were barely holding on, and the pressure was building fast. But here's what I've learned. Strength isn't just about talent or form, it's about belief. When everything around you is falling apart, when even your own team is struggling to find rhythm, the one thing that can still hold you together is we had injuries, we had setbacks. Some of our most promising players were young and inexperienced. And yet, through all of that, I kept telling the team one thing: play like you have nothing to lose. Because when you reach that point, when the expectations are gone and the noise fades, that's when you start playing with heart. That's when you rediscover your purpose. And that's exactly what happened. Slowly, match by match, we started rising. Not because we were suddenly the best team on paper, but because we learned how to fight. We learned how to trust each other. And we stopped fearing failure. I remember looking into the eyes of the players before the semi-final. They weren't the same team anymore. These weren't just young men trying to win a trophy. They were warriors who had been tested and refused to back down. We weren't driven by the fear of losing. We were driven by the fire of having already tasted what failure felt like and refusing to feel it again. You see, people assume champions are born in moments of glory. That's not true. Champions are born in struggle. They're forged in frustration, molded in disappointment, and built in silence. What people saw on that final day, us lifting the cup, the nation erupting, the world finally taking notice, that wasn't just a victory, it was a story of how setbacks can shape the strongest minds and hearts, of how failure, when embraced the right way, becomes your sharpest weapon. Most of us spend our lives running from failure. But in that tournament, we ran straight into it and came out stronger every time. Every pour-over, every dropped catch, every tough loss became fuel. We didn't bury our mistakes, we studied them. We learned from them. That's how transformation happens. Not by pretending you're flawless, but by confronting your flaws and daring to grow from them. Even on the final day, when the stakes were highest, I reminded the team of one thing. This is more than a game. This is a moment to show what resilience looks like. To prove that a group counted out by everyone could come back and make history. Not because they were perfect, but because they refused to break. The lesson I carry from that victory has nothing to do with the trophy. It's about how adversity shaped us. It's about how failure, instead of crushing our spirit, became the reason we found a deeper strength. It taught me that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about being the calmest presence when everything seems to be collapsing. It's about carrying the belief when no one else can, and passing that belief to others until it spreads like wildfire. If we had cruised through the tournament with easy wins, it wouldn't have meant the same. It was the struggle, the near elimination, the bruises and doubt. That's what made the triumph real. That's what made it unforgettable. Because it's not winning that defines you. It's how you fight when losing seems inevitable. After I left cricket, most people thought the journey was over. They expected a quiet retirement, maybe some commentary or charity work, but certainly not a leap into politics. And I don't blame them. What I chose next didn't make much sense from the outside. It looked like a step backward. To many, it looked like I was trading applause for rejection, comfort for chaos, and admiration for criticism. And that's exactly what it was. When I entered politics, I went from being celebrated to being mocked. I had no political background, no party machine behind me, and no deep alliances to rely on. I was stepping into a world that didn't welcome outsiders, especially those who dared to speak differently. And so began the next chapter of failure. But this time, I welcomed it. Election after election, I lost. Year after year, I stood on stages with almost no one listening. There were rallies with empty seats, speeches with no coverage, and moments where even my own team questioned why we were doing this. People called me delusional. They laughed, they dismissed me, and they said I was chasing an impossible dream, and sometimes I wondered if they were right. But here's what kept me going. The belief that failure wasn't a sign to quit. It was a test of how much I truly believed in what I was fighting for. You see, failure in politics isn't just personal, it's public, it's loud, it comes with headlines and mockery. But I had already learned long ago how to live with failure. I had learned that failure doesn't kill you, it sharpens you. It teaches you how to stand tall in the middle of doubt and how to keep your voice steady when the world tries to silence you. Every defeat made the vision clearer. Every rejection strengthened my resolve. I wasn't in it for applause. I wasn't chasing a title. I wanted to build something real, something that would outlive popularity. And that kind of mission can be built on quick wins. It has to survive rejection. It has to grow through resistance. I knew that if I stayed consistent, if I kept showing up, kept speaking the truth, kept pushing forward, eventually the tide would turn. And when it did, it wasn't because I became more clever or strategic. It was because people began to see that I wasn't going away. That no matter how many times I lost, I stood up again. That consistency built trust. That endurance built a movement. What once looked like stubbornness began to look like strength. And the same voices that had laughed started to listen. The truth is, most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they can't handle being misunderstood for long enough. They want quick validation. They want instant results. But anything worth building takes time. And the only way to survive that time is to stop chasing success and start living the mission. Failure was never the enemy. It was the proving ground. One of the most important things I've learned is this. If you want to grow, you have to stop fearing criticism. You have to stop avoiding failure. In fact, you need to lean into both. Because it's in those uncomfortable, painful moments when things fall apart, when people doubt you, when the plan doesn't work out, that real transformation begins. Throughout my journey, I've been criticized more than I can count. I've failed in the public eye over and over again. I've been labeled arrogant, naive, stubborn. I've been told I'll never succeed, that I should step aside, that I don't belong. But every time I heard those words, I reminded myself, this is part of the process. This is the test. Growth doesn't come wrapped in praise. It's buried in the middle of discomfort. The truth is, failure isn't a dead end. It's feedback. And criticism, no matter how harsh, always carries a message. Sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's emotional. But either way, it gives you a choice. You can either let it define you or use it to refine you. I chose to let it sharpen me, not because it was easy, but because the mission mattered more than my pride. There were moments I stood on stage and poured my heart out, only to be mocked. Moments where I gave everything, only to be told it wasn't enough. But those are the moments that force you to look inward and ask, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? And if your answer is rooted in something deeper than ego, then nothing, no loss, no attack, no rejection can stop you. People often think strength means never being affected by failure or criticism. That's not true. I've been affected. I've been disappointed. But what matters is what you do next. Do you crumble or do you come back stronger? I chose to come back stronger. Every time I fell short, I went back to the drawing board. I asked myself the hard questions. What can I do better? What went wrong? Where did I lose focus? I treated every setback like training, every criticism like coaching. And that's how real progress happens. Not in a straight line, but in cycles of effort, failure, reflection, and improvement. That's what separates those who grow from those who quit. It's not talent, it's not opportunity, it's the willingness to be uncomfortable long enough to learn and adapt. What helped me most was shifting how I saw failure. Instead of seeing it as a sign I wasn't good enough, I started seeing it as proof I was pushing boundaries. You don't fail when you stay in your comfort zone. You fail when you try something bold, something meaningful. And if you're failing in pursuit of something bigger than yourself, that failure is sacred. It's not a weakness. It's evidence that you're daring to evolve. And criticism, it stopped feeling like an attack. It started feeling like a compass. Even when it came from those who didn't understand me, I learned to ask, is there something in this that can help me grow? That shift in mindset changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just enduring failure, I was using it. You cannot protect your ego and grow at the same time. One has to give. And if you're serious about doing something meaningful, about creating real change within yourself or in the world, you'll have to let the ego take the hit. You'll have to listen, learn, adapt, and rise again. Failure wasn't there to break me, it was there to build me. There's something people don't talk about enough when it comes to failure: the loneliness. When you're losing, people leave. When things go wrong, supporters disappear. And in those moments, you find out very quickly who's real and who was just around for the ride. I've been through that. I've seen people who once stood beside me step back when the pressure mounted. I've felt the silence that comes after a major setback. I've walked into rooms where eyes were full of doubt instead of belief. That silence, that distance, it can break you if you let it. But that's when you realize something powerful. The journey you're on isn't supposed to be crowded. The deeper you go into your purpose, the fewer people will understand it. And that's okay, because growth is a lonely process. It strips away everything superficial and leaves you face to face with your own character. That's where strength is forged, not when everyone's cheering, but when you keep walking forward even when no one else is around. There were times I felt abandoned. Times I thought, is it worth it to keep going? But in those moments, I learned that you don't need the crowd, you need clarity. Clarity of why you started. Clarity of what you believe in. When you have that, you stop relying on external motivation. You develop something far more powerful: conviction. Conviction doesn't waver when things get hard. It doesn't depend on popularity. It's the inner fire that keeps burning even in the coldest seasons. And once you find that within yourself, you become unshakable. You don't just bounce back from failure, you grow through it. You use it to build something no one else can take from you. Resilience. I remember being written off again and again. Each time, I would hear the same voices: it's over, he's finished, you'll never come back from this. And yet, each time I came back stronger, not because I was trying to prove anyone wrong, but because I had learned to trust myself even when no one else did. That kind of belief doesn't come from wins, it comes from surviving losses that should have broken you, but didn't. When you're alone in failure, you start to listen to your own voice more clearly. You stop chasing validation and you start building something far more real: authenticity. And people eventually see that. They might not understand you at first, but they respect you in the end for sticking to your path, for not bending just to be accepted, for staying true even when it cost you everything. That's the kind of strength failure gives you. It shows you who you are underneath the success. It strips away the titles, the applause, the image, and what's left is the real you. And once you're comfortable standing in that space, you stop fearing failure altogether. Because you know that even if everything else is taken away, you can still rise. You can still rebuild. You can still lead. So yes, failure is lonely. It tests your patience, your courage, your relationships, but it also gives you a gift no easy win can offer. It teaches you how to stand alone. And once you've learned how to stand alone, you're never truly defeated again. People often ask, what keeps you going after so many setbacks? They think it's some secret strategy or unbreakable confidence, but it's neither. What keeps me going is purpose. Purpose is what turns failure from something painful into something powerful. It gives you the strength to take another step when everything around you is telling you to stop. Without purpose, failure feels final. With it, failure becomes. There were moments when things fell apart so badly I could have walked away, when nothing seemed to be working, when all the effort, all the years, all the sacrifice looked like they were leading to a dead end. But every time I stood on the edge of giving up, something deeper pulled me back. It wasn't ego, it wasn't pride, it was that quiet voice reminding me why I started in the first place. That voice reminding me that this journey was never just about me. When you attach your work to something greater than yourself, whether it's your country, your people, a cause you believe in, you stop measuring progress by how easy or smooth the road is. You stop measuring it by how true you're staying to your mission. That changes everything. You stop panicking when things go wrong. You stop doubting your worth when you fail. Because you know the purpose hasn't changed. It's still worth fighting for. There were years when it felt like I was speaking into a void, when the message wasn't landing, when the criticism was constant, and when even the victories were short-lived. But that's when purpose became my anchor. That's when I learned that endurance doesn't come from motivation, it comes from meaning. When what you're doing truly matters to you, you find the strength to stand up again, even when you're exhausted. You stop waiting for external results to validate your path. You keep going because stopping simply isn't an option anymore. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've made a promise to something larger than comfort or recognition. And that promise becomes sacred. You carry it through every failure, every fall, every moment of doubt. Purpose doesn't always make things easier, but it makes them clearer. It reminds you that failure isn't personal. It's part of the path. It tells you that growth isn't about avoiding setbacks. It's about learning from them. It keeps your vision alive when the world tries to blur it. And eventually, that vision starts to shine through the darkness. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you refuse to quit when it wasn't. In the toughest times, I wasn't driven by the desire to win. I was driven by the desire to serve, to contribute, to stand for something real. And that desire made every failure worth it, because even when I fell, I knew I was falling in the right direction. That's the kind of failure I can live with, the kind that pushes you forward, not backward. You only discover your true potential when you're tested. And the test isn't whether you can succeed, it's whether you can keep going when you don't. That's what purpose gives you. It gives you a reason to rise when there's nothing left to prove, when no one's watching, when everything is against you. Because in the end, it's not the outcome that defines you, it's your willingness to keep showing up. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from everything I've shared, it's this. Failure is not your enemy. It's your teacher, your mirror, and sometimes your greatest ally. Don't run from it. Don't let it shame you into silence. Face it. Learn from it. Let it mold you into something stronger than before. Because every time you fall and choose to rise again, you're not just building success, you're building character, resilience, and a life that no setback can. And that, more than anything else, is what makes you truly unstoppable.